Since we're performance rebuilding this and it's going to see some heavy use, I'm going to do what I've done to my own transmissions over the years is prevent pin failure. I've had these roll pins either A, fall out because the transmission gets so hot the aluminum expands and then they lose their press fit and then they fall out. I've had third and fourth most commonly fail this way, but I've also had first and second do it. Or a second type of failure I've had is just where after years and years and years of fatigue enough that the roll pin will actually crack and it'll let the fork slide just a little bit, so you'll lose one gear but not the other, kind of a thing. How I prevent that is I'll take the pin out. The hole is already to the correct size to be able to run a 1/4-20 tap through it. And then I got these 1/4-20 bolts that I then thread through the fork, the steel shaft, and due to the length of the tap and running out, I actually cut down the length a little bit, put a taper on it, it kind of like jams in place on the bottom, as well as getting tight on the top to the head at the same time. Plus put some Loctite on there. I've never had an issue with like that, and it prevents this type of failure. These shafts are hardened and it takes some effort, and you got to be real careful not to break the taps off. I've got two different types of taps. I got one here that I'm going to start with, which has a great big lead in. It's probably 5-6 threads. And then I've got another one that's like 4. And if I have to, I go back and forth with them. You just want to be gentle, because if you do break the tap off in there, which I've also done, that was at the racetrack with a shitty tap and trying to do everything I could to not miss a session, kind of a thing. I mean, it got me back out there, but the tap itself broke a couple of events later and ended up ruining a whole weekend. So it's not a good fix if you break it off. And right now I got to the point where I feel like I'm putting too much pressure on there. And we'll switch taps, because the little faster lead in will cut a few more threads that are already started. And then we can switch back and forth where we go from the high lead in tap being, you know, getting threads started, finish them with the shorter one, just because then it's not trying to cut new threads really. It just lets you get a little bit further, you can creep through them. Alright, it's been a couple of minutes of back and forth. You just see the tap coming out the other side of the aluminum now, so we can't actually get it all the way through. That's why we need to cut that bolt down and put a taper on it, because we're bottomed out on the threads on the top. To determine how much I need to cut off the bolt, I just run it in all the way. So there's where it's kind of jamming tight. I will measure this distance, leave about a thread, and then just cut a taper to the front edge. That way we'll be able to bottom the head out against the top here, and it will be jam nutting itself into the other side on the bottom. Alright, I check fit it. It needed, I mean, it's just barely off of the head, so I ground just a little bit more chamfer lead in on the edge of the screw. Now we're ready to Loctite it and put it in for good. And that was with actually like tightening it down to make sure that we had a height that was representative. Now I just Loctite all over this thing. Now granted, for sure this is overkill considering it only had a little bit of tension roll pin in there. To start with, I could feel the jam nutting on the bottom, and looks like now we're bottomed out on the top. So I'll make sure I got good leverage on this. Yeah, we'll just give it another, I don't know, 1/16 of a turn, 1/8 of a turn, something like that. Make sure it's on there tight. So now we've got that nut absolutely tight on the top, plenty of Loctite in there. It's pushing out. I'll wipe that off and do the same thing with the other one. One of the next steps in prep is the bronze shift fork pads. These are the plastic ones that are stock, and as you can see, they are damaged already. These two in particular came off of the 3rd, 4th gear set and would have begun to cause an issue if they weren't already. And I imagine that this damage is from pressing extra hard during the shift in order to get it to go in gear. And that would be due to this shift sleeve ring. If you can see it, how rounded off and beat up this side is versus how you can see the machining angle and the V-point on this side. Oh, I believe this was 4th gear, 3rd gear is the one that was beat up. We've also got new rings coming. Hopefully they'll be here today so I can put this transmission back together, but we'll be replacing 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and I believe 5th gear was also beat up a little bit. Yeah, there's 5th gear, it's also beat up. Now 5th and reverse have only engagement on one side, so that's one thing you need to pay attention to when putting them back together also. Sometimes the fit of these is a little hit or miss. Like, they don't want to just push on, which they shouldn't. They should have some tension on them. However, if I measure it with the caliper, they should go on. I mean, we're talking within 2 thou. So a lot of that just might be burrs from not machining everything on the fork itself. So if I do the sides, then I can get it to tap on. However, I'm still struggling getting the center portion to go, so we're gonna put some chamfers on there as well. I'm just doing this with the file. Should be able to just help lead it in, kind of a thing. So I'm gonna just line it up. We just want to do some light tapping to get it to start. And there we go. Otherwise, I would have had to fight with that. I mean, I've had to like squeeze them on with pliers before, and this seems to be the best way. It's just a matter of taking a file, putting a little bit of a chamfer, because the factory left a big old burr on there. And then they line up nice. Nothing to it. Helps to stand on it. Alright, we need to press this bushing out, put the new one in. That's what I got this tool made for. We got a new yoke for this. I mean, obviously it ain't got the press fit on there, but there's just a little bit of wiggle room with the old bushing. This is the new one's pretty nice. There is an orientation to these. As you can see, it's got a bit of an oil groove in there. That needs to line up with this groove on the tail shaft. And that's just so that I get some splash oiling up on there. The tangs go towards the outside. I'm sure they're for an alignment tool when it's originally assembled. As long as you got a tool, I'll use the press here just to make sure I can get the height set. And there we got the bushing changed out. The height is just a little bit below flush on this step. Flush should probably be fine as well. Some test fit in this yoke. And it's got just a little bit of a tight spot, but it's kind of top and bottom on here. So I've already loosened it up a little bit doing this. But if I stand on everything and just give it a tap, frees it up. Because before I really had to push, and now it almost falls through. So all we're doing by hitting with the tap there is we're just giving a little bit of a knock against the high spot to kind of flatten it out. And you can kind of see where that high spot is. And same thing, it's towards the back, you know, down low here where it was being tight. So by knocking it a little bit at the top, we're going to straighten everything out. So, otherwise, it has adequate clearance. Once the lubrication in there and we get the tail shaft spinning or whatever, it won't take long. Just knock that high spot down a little bit more and we won't have a problem. So there's a few different style seals that all fit this transmission. There's these two styles with the like dust boots, and it really doesn't matter. I've run all three of them. This one is the one that I've just kind of settled on that I use most of the time. But we just need to press that in. If you're careful and you're just doing it with a punch, you can tap it in like that. Otherwise, I like to find something that's a circle, so at least you can hit square. I just made this quick in the tool. I mean, it was a piece. I probably used one of these sides before and just kind of let it squish down a little bit, but I do this often enough. They're just gonna make a tool. So that'll set on there and then press nice and even. I'm going to start assembling what I can, even though I'm still waiting on some parts right now. First part to put on is the first and second gear synchro. I'm waiting for that outer ring, but I can put the inner on right away and still move along. This one just goes on with a little bit of tapping like this all the way around. I do believe this one can go on either upside down or not. However, pay attention to wear marks. They'll really tell you whether or not something was rubbing against something else. This one's got a witness mark that is the same size as the inner part of first gear. So I know that that was facing first gear to this side in order to leave that witness mark in the first place, considering it bumps up against the step on the main shaft and there wouldn't be a wear mark there because they're keyed together. Once we have our Syncro inner on, we need to put the snap ring on. It should be the largest snap ring that you have. So now we need the Syncro. So we need one of our carbon blocker rings and one set of the first and second gear. It was a blocker ring, Syncro, and an inner cone. I like to set these together first, make sure they're all snapped together, because it's these three parts that all need to fit together. And the inner cone is keyed to the outer blocker ring, and then there's tabs off of the Syncro itself that engage with the gear. So at this point we're looking at it like this, and then it sets on and you rotate it till it drops in. We have second gear. And spin it till it drops on. I like to keep a manual handy. I have a TR3650 service manual just downloaded to my phone and saved. If I can track that thing down again, I'll put it in the description so that you guys can find that. It's the one I find the most handy. And it's nice just to reference it back and forth. Like, I've done this enough times, and I know that you can get it together and functional without necessarily having a manual, because kind of things only fit one way, and to really get it in and actually make it work. So it's nice that you can't, like, if you screw it up, you're going to know it, kind of a thing. But it's nice just to have something for reference to make sure that you know, everything is going together the way it should. So at this point, we've got one of these holes here in the main shaft that needs a ball bearing. There are a few different sizes, so you got to make sure you got the right one. And if you're prone to dropping and losing things, such as these tiny little ball bearings, you can buy a ball bearing, just generic kit. I've done that because I've lost one, and it was easier to just have some on hand than to constantly be looking for something I couldn't find. Now, I like to use a little grease on these to keep a little retention. Let's get a little dab of grease off the grease gun. And I can kind of poke a little bit in the hole there. And it'll help hold the ball bearing in place. Now we're going to have a spacer to go on here, which we have two different ones. However, they are different sizes and different spacing. So like I said, it's pretty tough to get it screwed up. You know, one of them's not going to fit. Oh, wait, I take that back. There's three of them. However, two are the same size and thickness. So again, it's only going to fit where it will go. Oh, there we are there. Now I believe it's one of these lock collars and bearing surfaces here. Yep. And this will need to be pressed on. Might even be able to hammer it on if you've got something the right size. Not bad. I haven't actually hammered that on before. So that's nice to know that that can be done. Oh no, but I pinched everything here because it wasn't quite lined up. Now that will happen. Now I need to very carefully fix that. See, what happened was when everything was shifting around, this key got out, and that's not going down because that should be flush with that other surface. So, I wonder if I can just kind of hit on the gear. Enough to free it up. No, not quite. All right. There we go. Now, got a little freedom in there again. We can continue installing. Okay, well, it feels like it's bottomed out, and there's just a little bit of end play on the gear, so that seems like that should be right. Ready for another bearing. And third gear. Now we'll need another one of our carbon Syncros for third gear to put on, and should be the synchronizer assembly followed by a snap ring. But when you put that synchronizer assembly together, now we've got two that are the same. These are fifth and reverse. You need the one that faces both ways and doesn't have a snap ring on it. It's also pretty obvious about what fits where. Oh, we've got one of our springs and locks missing out of this one, so we'll put a spring back in. And again, we're waiting for the outside ring, so this is kind of as far as we're going to be able to get assembled here. There is a step to this one. So obviously there's going to be one side where it fits properly and one side where it doesn't. And we can see that if we put it on this way, we don't have a snap ring groove for it to fit on. So I'll flip it over. Make sure all our stuff lines up, and now we can see our snap ring grooves available. I will say the snap rings are always ones that I find a little bit hard to remember which one goes where. They are different sizes though, so it's something worth checking on. I think last time I measured it with caliper to see. Alright, so that one's for fifth gear. That one's got to be for the Speedo. So I feel like these could go either way, however one is thicker than the other. But they both fit in each other's grooves. The other thing is it needs to go inside of this. I've got this one that only needs to compress slightly to make it fit, versus the other ones gotta compress a lot, so this is the correct one. Again, if you screw it up, it's probably going to tell you before you get too far. And then this is where this thrust washer goes on and snaps into place. That's exactly how it should fit. Now we're ready to start installing stuff from the other side, and I can't do that till I get these outside shift rings, so now we gotta wait. Alright, had parts show up. So I got these sliders from AMP. Now we've got our 1, 2, 3, 4, and fifth and reverse are the same. I only got one because I only need one. We had one that was in great shape yet, so get these unpacked and we'll keep putting it together. Alright, these sliders are different sizes, so you can only put them on the correct one. Clearly that's first and second. There we go. First, second, and third, fourth are the same. Fifth and reverse though has the steps. So they are directional. With it flipped over, we're ready to put first gear in. Need to get our slider ring set up. And put that on. There we go. Now we need the reverse clutch cone, which is going to be one of these two. They're the same size, but once again, we got different diameters. Makes it easy to tell what goes where. Try the bigger one first. Yep, that's it. Let's reverse clutch cone on, install the reverse blocker ring. So then we got another one of our carbon backed ones. There we go. And we got a bearing spacer, which should be our second one here. Alright, and another bearing. We should have another Syncro assembly. So we gotta get this set up. And we're going to do it as attached to the gear. So the deciding factor here is, we've got our gear, and the Syncro is going to be coming from the direction away from the gear, so the snap ring that's in the center bore hub needs to go to the gear face. Then we can place our springs and whatever you want to call these things. In there. Now, sometimes these springs get damaged and they'll be short. You want to just throw it away then. You can buy little parts kits. I know Hamlin has them. That's where I've got them before. And I've just got it so that I know I got a few extras around too if I need them. And again, you need to make sure that our teeth are facing the Syncro the correct way. Now with this as a whole assembly, on it goes. and turn it till it pops in. Now we should have another hole exposed for a ball bearing. And this will be the not stepped thrust washer. There we go. The big bearing. Alright, and fifth gear has a step. Next is our snap ring for fifth gear. If your front seal needs replacing, now is the time to do that. This one's not showing any signs of it, and honestly I've beat the absolute crap out of a transmission for a while, and I've not ever had to replace that seal. We got our shims that need to go behind the bearings, or rather behind the races, and they are just meant to be kind of a slip fit in there, just like that. That's normal. We're now at the point where we're ready to start putting everything together, and we need to go over to the other bench. Because over here, I have this hole drilled in the bench just for this purpose. So we've got our input shaft here. We need another synchronizer cone, and we need this bearing to put in there, and we also need this thrust roller bearing and our washer that fell off of our main shaft. So we can come over here, and this whole works, just gets slid right in. And we gotta have just a little bit of a dimple in the table, or you can space up on the 2x4s or something, and it's just so that that input shaft can sit in all the way. Put that spacer back on the front. Yeah, we'll set that in there for now. All right, we need all of our shift forks and the counter shaft. And we can start by setting our counter shaft in place. Now the difficult part here is when you've got the shift forks installed on the rods already. You can take them all off and make it much easier, and then everything's just kind of a setting it in place sort of a deal. But since we've already modified our forks, we want to try to do it all at once. Oh, did I actually get that in the first try? Normally I screw this up big time, but I know that third, fourth is the front two gears, and that's going to have the shift fork that's closest to the end, and then first and second, and then reverse and fifth. Biggest thing is these should all line up and make sense. So now we lift all of this together. We need to try to get it lined up not only with the counter shaft, but the input shaft and everything else while dropping these rods into these holes. And hopefully not have everything fall apart on us. There. As long as we don't lose any little synchro parts, doesn't look like it. And shift that back into neutral. And there we go. There we go. I'll be honest, it's pretty rare that it pops together like that, but there's a finesse to it, and I've done it enough times. Otherwise, like I said, if you have the shift rods and the forks all separated, you can be pushing on a fork, putting a rod in, push on a fork, put a rod in, and so on, and then drive the roll pins in after if you're doing stock. Now at this point, I'm going to grab the springs for the detents and put those in. Now at this point, it's not nearly necessary, and I'm not sure how much I can actually quantify whether there's a gain. You can use a washer that'll fit inside to shim these springs up so they're a little bit stiffer. My reasoning behind that is so that it can hold a gear better. You know, it'll have more spring pressure to hold that detent in, so it'll have a little more firm of a shift. I have shimmed mine up. I'll shim this one up too. I don't know that there was a quantifiable or even really noticeable difference, because these springs are probably got a pretty high pressure on them anyway. I just know if you shim them too much, you won't be able to get the spring to compress the rest of the way, in which case you won't be able to shift it, but usually just putting a washer or two under there can do the job. Alright, we're ready for our case half now. The big thing here is we're not going to glue it right away. We want to get it together, bolt it up, and then find out what our end play is. Now the hard part here is now it's sitting there and it's stuck, and that's because of that bearing at the back of the counter shaft. Right here is hitting the gear that's inside of the case. So we need to have that loose. And have it tucked behind the gear when we put it together. Alright, now we'll stick a few bolts into the end from the bell housing side to bolt the cases together, and then we'll measure the end play. So I check end play by setting a magnetic dial indicator on the shafts themselves. So I've got it magnetized against there. Now I'm on the counter shaft right now. Kind of see where we're at on the gauge. And with this bolt threaded in the end, I can kind of lift on it. You can see we got about a thou and a half of movement. Spec is 1 to 5. And I'm okay being even tighter than that. Tight enough to be, say, 2 thou of press fit, actually. You know, it's not enough to cause it to seize up on the bearing at all. Now in the main shaft, we'll do the same thing, just by lifting up and down. And that one's like, I'm not even hardly getting any movement out of it at all. Like me, I can see it move a couple of tenths. But if I take everything off, make sure we're not on the input shaft there. Everything's turning just fine. I'm okay with that. I mean, spec might be 1 to 5, but at the same time, if you're going to be abusing these transmissions, the cases are going to heat up and expand about twice as fast as all the steel components inside. So if we started at, let's say on the loose side, at 5 thou of clearance, by the time everything gets hot and heat soaked, it's probably going to be closer to 10. I don't know that it'll actually double, but I know that if it ends up being too much, you'll get to the point where the gear teeth start riding up on each other, and you can actually get to the failure point where it'll take all the teeth off of the gears. It's also worth taking into account that the shims that went back in this case were the ones that came out of this case, and all of the stack up of parts are the same parts. So obviously this one was good enough to leave the factory, even though it's under spec, but we're gonna be fine. And I'd rather run it this way anyway, so now I gotta pull the case back off, and then we'll put some sealer on between them and reassemble back to this point. Alright, also before you go and put all your shift rods on there, do your mock-up to check end play before doing that. It makes it way easier to take it back apart. But anyway, you know, back to this point, we need to put some kind of gasket maker on the case halves. It's not really all that important. I like the Permatech Ultra Black, however this one's dried up like they always seem to be after you use them. So otherwise I got this gasket shellac. I've used this too. It works fine. So just got to make sure got your surfaces cleaned off, and then just put a little light layer on both sides and stick it together. There we go. Something was hung up with my secondary shaft. Or maybe that race on the other side wasn't quite in there square. But now I can see we're down seated all the way. So let's get the bolts in the front. Now these bolts are not an ugga-dugga situation. They're only meant to be torqued to like 25 foot-pounds. So you gotta be easy on them. I'm still gonna put them in with this though, but we'll do it on setting number 1. it's at this point confirmed that my cases did pull down nice and flat. Well, they shouldn't have pulled down, they should have been down there anyway, but I can see where it squeezed out the gasket maker. So now we can move on to the shifting parts in the top. So up next is our lockout pins for between the gears. Can start on either side, but they drop in. Like that. And then you gotta get it pushed over. And then you get all three in there. Now you got the little retainer and 2 bolts. Put a little Loctite on these. Just blue is fine. There we go. So that spacer goes in with the smaller side down. Next is the bearings. There are different styles of this. There's also a one-piece one, but they can go on there like that. We've got our shift detent, or whatever you want to call it. That goes in. Make sure you don't forget about this rubber bushing that it can... Oh, it's not rubber, but it's hard plastic. Keeps it from like limiting the distance of the shift. We've got our shift mechanisms, or whatever you want to call these things. The part that actually does the shifting. I like to get these started ahead of time though. Just helps with lining stuff up. Ugh, if you can do it. The other method is just get it in there in place. Get a needle nose pliers to hold on to it. Alright, make sure that detent is in there, or finger, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what half this stuff's called. But let's get our other shift ring in place. And you saw I just about put it on that way, and that would have been upside down. We need to roll it over, make sure the pointy ends are going the right way. There we go. Oh, now this one needs all of this engaged together. There we go. Alright. We've got our last carbon synchro. Make sure that it goes on and lines up in the detents. And we just need our last snap ring now. Or no, I guess it ain't the last snap ring yet. Just one more for the Speedo. And whoo, sparks. We have one more ball bearing here and the gear. This is where you always usually end up cracking these dang Speedo gears. Because if I go and try to pound on that thing right now, it's going to crack. So let's try to hone this thing a little bit, shall we? Honestly, we're just trying to knock the high spots off. Alright, it looks like we got, I don't know, about halfway around. Might be enough to make it go on nice. If I was going to work today, I'd just hit this in the rod hone at work, because then I know it would be round. There we go. Snap ring. There. You just need to get that started. It's just the yoke will push against it and it just kind of stops on the sleeve wherever maximum drive shaft engagement is with the yoke. Oh wait, make sure everything's clean on your flange surfaces. Hit it with the gasket maker again. Alright, here's where you gotta be a little bit careful putting stuff together, because you got the cup the shifter actually goes in, and another bushing that need to go on here while you're lining everything up. There we go. So now we got those in there. These also don't see a ton of torque. I think it's the same 25 foot-pounds. So run them in easy. There she is, other than the shifter. Alright, just went through, made sure to torque all the bolts, 25, tail housing and bell housing. That all went great, no problems there. This transmission, somebody had pulled the fork pivot out of, so we need to remember to put that back in. A stock one's probably fine for something that came with these stock. If you're doing like maybe a dual disc clutch or in a converted application kind of a thing, I highly recommend an adjustable. Like I have to run an adjustable on my Oldsmobile. with the way that setup works there. It's just the spacing, because otherwise with the double clutch, or the dual clutch, it rubs on the pressure plate, so I gotta shorten it up. However, this one is going behind a 4.6, so everything should bolt up. It should all be right and correct without having to do anything there. So there's that to do, and then our shifter, but I'm not going to do that yet because it's going to have to wait until after we get it in the car. I've also got the shifter to put on, and if you're running a stock one, they're nice and short. You should be able to put it on. Aftermarket ones might be a little taller, they're going to have a little bit bigger boss on the top. You might have to do some clearancing of the sheet metal in order to make that fit. Either way, they can't have the whole handle on them, obviously, for being able to try to get it in and out of the car. So we've got aftermarket, I think it's Triax one that'll go on here with the handles on, so I still got to take that apart to be able to set it up on here, and then we got to wait till we can get it in the car and start mocking it up. Well, I hope that video with a little more like point of view camera styling can help you, get through rebuilding your transmission, and it all made sense. I tried to do a little bit better than the older video I did like 3-4 years ago. We'll just, I don't know, I kind of have to see how that plays out. Hopefully it was helpful, but this is the start of a 5-speed swap series that we're going to be doing on this Mercury Grand Marquis. This thing's pretty cool. Guy autocrosses it and wants to do some track stuff with it too, so the 5 speed should be a lot of fun once we get it in there.